The metal door slammed shut with a sound that echoed through the prison block. Li Te stumbled forward as the alien guard pushed him into the crowded holding area. Around him, dozens of creatures from different worlds sat or stood in small groups. Some looked like giant insects. Others had blue skin and 4 arms. A few had scales like snakes but walked on 2 legs. Li Te was human. He looked very ordinary compared to the strange aliens around him. He was not very tall, maybe average height for a human. His black hair was cut short and neat. His clothes were simple gray prison clothes that all the prisoners wore. To anyone looking at him, he seemed like just another weak creature that the Vrex Empire had captured. The Vrex were the ones running this prison ship. They looked like large lizards that walked upright. Their skin was dark green and covered in small scales. They had yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. Sharp teeth filled their mouths. They carried energy weapons and wore black armor that made them look even more scary. Captain Veltar was in charge of this ship called the Void Talon. He was bigger than most Vrex, with old scars across his face. When he looked at the human prisoners, his eyes showed only boredom. Humans were new to this part of space. The Vrex had only found them a few months ago. To Captain Veltar, humans seemed weak and not worth worrying about. Li Te found a spot near the back wall and sat down. He watched everything around him but said nothing. Other prisoners whispered to each other in different languages. Some cried. Others looked angry. Li Te just sat quietly and observed. A human woman walked over to him. She had long black hair tied back and kind eyes behind small glasses. "You are human too," she said in Korean. "I am Dr. Kim So-young. I was working on the research station on New Busan when they attacked." Li Te nodded. "I am Li Te. I was on New Busan also." He did not say more about himself. Another human joined them. This one was a young man with nervous energy. He kept looking around like he expected trouble. "Park Min-ho," he said, introducing himself. "I was flying cargo ships between the colonies. Bad luck that I was landing when these lizards showed up." The 3 humans sat together. Dr. Kim So-young told them what she knew about their situation. "They have been attacking human colonies for weeks. Small ones mostly. They seem to think we are not dangerous. Just another primitive species to add to their empire." Li Te listened but asked few questions. He seemed calm in a way that surprised the others. Most new prisoners were scared or angry. Li Te appeared almost relaxed. Days passed on the prison ship. The Vrex guards made all prisoners work. Some cleaned the ship. Others worked in the kitchens preparing food. Li Te was assigned to the waste processing center. It was dirty work that most prisoners hated. Li Te did not complain. The waste processing center was in the lower levels of the ship. Few guards came down there. Li Te worked with aliens from many different worlds. There was Hayuk, who looked like a large bear but had 6 arms. He had been a leader on his world before the Vrex conquered it. There was also Bina, a blue-skinned woman with large eyes who could speak many languages. "You are very quiet for a human," Hyuk said one day as they worked. "Most new prisoners ask many questions. Want to know about escape. You just work." Li Te smiled a little. "Questions can be dangerous. Better to watch and learn first." This was true. Li Te did watch everything. He learned the daily schedules of the guards. He figured out which areas of the ship had fewer security cameras. He memorized the layout of the corridors. But he never wrote anything down. He kept it all in his head. The Vrex guards barely noticed him. To them, he was just another worker. Security Chief Crexmore walked through the work areas sometimes. He was even bigger than Captain Veltar and meaner. His yellow eyes looked at every prisoner like they were insects he wanted to step on. But when he looked at Li Tae, he saw nothing interesting. Just a small human doing his job. Dr. Kim So-young and Park Min-ho were assigned to different work details. Dr. Kim So-young worked in the medical bay, helping to treat sick prisoners. Park Min-ho cleaned the upper decks where the important ship systems were located. In the evenings, when prisoners had free time, the three humans would meet and share what they had learned. The medical bay has weak security, Dr. Kim So-young said quietly. Only one guard most of the time. But there are cameras everywhere. Park Min-ho nodded. I have seen some of the control rooms. The navigation area has many computers, but getting there would be impossible. Too many guards. Li Tae listened to everything but shared little about his own work area. He did mention that the waste processing center connected to many parts of the ship through maintenance tunnels. Could be useful to know, he said simply. Weeks went by. Li Tae became known among the prisoners as someone who could solve problems. When the food dispensers in one section broke down, he figured out how to fix them. When some prisoners got sick from the alien food, he found a way to make it safer to eat. He never made a big show of his knowledge. He just helped when needed. The other prisoners began to trust him. Even aliens who had been enemies on their home worlds would listen when Li Tae suggested solutions to problems. He spoke softly and never gave orders. But somehow people followed his advice. The Vrex crew noticed that problems in the prison sections were getting solved faster than before. Chief Engineer Zulhak asked Security Chief Krexmore about it. The prisoners seem more organized lately. Fewer complaints. Fewer fights. Krexmore shrugged. Probably just getting used to their situation. Weak species always accept their fate eventually. Neither of them thought to investigate further. To them, humans were just another conquered people. Nothing special about them at all. But late at night, when the ship was quiet, Li Tae would stand at the small window in his cell and look out at the stars. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something that none of his captors had noticed. It was not fear or despair. It was patience, like he was waiting for something. Dr. Kim So-young had noticed this about him. You seem different from most prisoners, she said one evening. Like you have a plan. Li Tae looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled that small smile again. Sometimes the best plan is to wait and watch. Learn everything you can. And be ready when the time comes. Ready for what? But Li Tae just looked back out at the stars and said nothing more. 3 weeks had passed since Li Tae arrived on the Void Talon. The prison ship continued its journey through space toward the heart of the Vrex Empire. Li Tae had settled into the daily routine of work and rest. But he was far from idle during this time. Every day brought new opportunities to learn. In the Waste Processing Center, Li Tae worked alongside aliens who had been prisoners for months or even years. They told him stories about the Vrex Empire and how it operated. They shared knowledge about different star systems and which worlds had fallen to Vrex conquest. Hyuk, the 6-armed bear-like alien, had been a military commander on his home world. He knew about Vrex battle tactics and ship designs. They are strong, but not clever, he told Li Tae during a quiet moment. They use brute force for everything. No creativity in their thinking. Bina, the blue-skinned translator, had worked for Vrex administration before she was imprisoned for asking too many questions. She understood their bureaucracy and how their command structure worked. Captain Veltar reports to Fleet Admiral Nexval, she explained. but he has freedom to make decisions about prisoners. As long as he delivers us to Vrex Prime on schedule, nobody questions his methods. Li Tay absorbed all this information. He asked careful questions that seemed natural. Never too many at once. Never anything that might make the other prisoners suspicious. To them, he appeared to be just another captured leader trying to understand his situation. But Li Tay was learning much more than just facts about the Vrex Empire. He was studying the ship itself. The waste processing center gave him access to many parts of the vessel that other prisoners never saw. Maintenance tunnels connected different sections. Service corridors led to important areas. And the waste systems themselves revealed a lot about how the ship operated. Chief Engineer Zulhak had noticed that equipment was breaking down less often in areas where Li Tay worked. When a group of prisoners complained that their cell ventilation was not working, Zulhak sent Li Tay to look at it. Li Tay examined the ventilation system carefully. It was similar to systems he had seen before, but with some important differences. The Vrex had combined technology from several different species they had conquered. This made their ships powerful, but also complicated. Sometimes the different technologies did not work well together. "I think I can fix this," Li Tay told Zulhak, "but I will need some basic tools and maybe an hour to work." Zulhak was skeptical. The ship's own engineers had spent days trying to solve the ventilation problem. How could a primitive human prisoner fix it so quickly? But they were running out of options. If the ventilation failed completely, some prisoners might die. That would mean fewer slaves to sell at Vrex Prime. "Fine," Zulhak decided. "But you work under guard, and if you break anything, you will regret it." Li Tay nodded and got to work. He moved quickly and efficiently through the ventilation system. His hands seemed to know exactly what to do. Within an hour, air was flowing properly again. But Li Tay had done more than just fix the immediate problem. He had quietly made small improvements that would prevent similar failures in the future. Zulhak was impressed despite himself. "Where did you learn to work with life support systems?" he asked. "My colony had old equipment," Li Tay replied. "I learned to fix things when they broke. Could not afford to replace everything." This explanation satisfied Zulhak. Many primitive colonies had to make do with whatever technology they could get. It made sense that someone would learn to be resourceful. He decided to use Li Tay for other repair jobs when needed. Over the following days, Li Tay was called to fix problems in different parts of the ship. Each time, he did exactly what was asked and nothing more. He never seemed curious about areas that were not his business. He never asked questions about ship operations or security. He just fixed the problems and returned to his regular work. But during each repair job, Li Tay was learning. He mapped the ship's layout in his mind. He observed which systems were critical and which were less important. He noticed where the security cameras were located and which areas had blind spots. Most importantly, he began to understand how the ship's computer networks were connected. The Vrex used a central computer system to control most ship functions. But like their other technology, it was a combination of different systems from conquered worlds. Li Tay recognized elements from several different designs. Some he had seen before, others were new to him, but he could figure out how they worked by watching and testing. During his third week on the ship, Li Tay made a discovery that changed everything. While repairing a communication relay in a maintenance tunnel, he found an access point to the ship's quantum communication array. This was the system the Vrex used to send messages across vast distances of space almost instantly. Li Tay looked at the access point for a long time. Then he made a decision that would have surprised his captors. Instead of trying to send a distress signal immediately, he began to modify the relay in a very subtle way. His changes were so small that they would not show up on normal diagnostics, but they would allow him to piggyback messages onto routine transmissions. The modifications took several hours to complete. Li Te worked slowly and carefully. He could not afford to be discovered. When he was finished, the relay looked exactly the same as before. But now it could do something the Vrex did not know about. That night, Dr. Kim So-young noticed that Li Te seemed different. He was still calm and quiet, but there was something new in his expression. "You look like someone who just solved a difficult puzzle," she observed. Li Te smiled his small smile. "Maybe I did, but some puzzles take time to complete." Park Min-ho had his own news to share. His cleaning duties had taken him to the navigation section several times. "I have been watching their star charts," he said quietly. "I think I understand where we are going. There is a planet called Vrex Prime. It seems to be their capital world. We will arrive there in about 2 weeks." Dr. Kim So-young looked worried. "What happens to prisoners when they reach Vrex Prime?" Hyuk had overheard their conversation. He moved closer and spoke in a low voice. "Some are sold as slaves. Others are used for entertainment. None of it is good." The three humans sat in silence for a moment. Then Li Te spoke. 2 weeks is a long time. Many things can happen in 2 weeks. His calm confidence was puzzling to the others. Most prisoners became more desperate as they got closer to their final destination. Li Te seemed to be getting more relaxed. It was as if he knew something that they did not. In the days that followed, Li Te continued his routine of work and observation. But now he had a new purpose. Every few days, when he was called to make repairs near the communication relay, he would upload a small data packet. The packets were disguised as routine system maintenance reports. To anyone monitoring the communications, they would look like normal ship operations. But hidden in those innocent-looking reports was detailed information about the Void Talon, technical specifications, security procedures, guard rotations, prisoner populations, everything that someone would need to know if they wanted to track or intercept the ship. Li Te sent these messages to coordinates that he had memorized long ago. He did not know if anyone would receive them. Space was vast, and the Vrex controlled this region, but he sent them anyway, because if someone was looking for him, they would need to know where to find him. The Vrex crew remained completely unaware of what was happening. To them, Li Te was still just a useful prisoner who could fix broken equipment. Captain Veltar rarely thought about the humans at all. Security Chief Krexmore was focused on more dangerous prisoners like the Jeltari warriors who still sometimes tried to fight the guards. But far away, in a part of space the Vrex had never seen, Li Te's messages were being received, and the people who received them were making plans of their own. The alarm that woke everyone on the prison ship was different from the usual wake-up call. It was sharp and urgent, the kind of sound that meant real trouble. Li Te sat up in his cell and listened carefully. Emergency lights were flashing in the corridors. He could hear Vrex guards running and shouting orders. Within minutes, all prisoners were ordered to their workstations. But something was wrong with the ship's life support systems. The air in the prison sections was getting thick and hard to breathe. Several alien prisoners had already collapsed. Others were coughing and gasping. Dr. Kim So-young was called to the medical bay to help with the sick prisoners. Park Min-ho was sent to help evacuate prisoners from the worst affected areas. Lee Tae found himself being escorted by 2 guards to the engineering section. Chief Engineer Zulhak was waiting for him with a desperate expression. "The atmospheric processors are failing," Zulhak explained quickly. "We cannot identify the problem. The life support for the prison sections will completely fail within 6 hours. If that happens, most of the prisoners will die." Lee Tae looked at the engineering displays that showed the ship's life support status. Red warning lights blinked everywhere. The numbers on the screens were getting worse by the minute. This was not a simple equipment failure. This was a cascade breakdown where one failing system was causing others to fail. "Can you fix this?" Zulhak asked. There was real worry in his voice. If all the prisoners died, Captain Veltar would face serious consequences from his superiors. The Vrex Empire expected their prison ships to deliver live prisoners, not corpses. Lee Tae studied the displays for several minutes. The problem was complex, but he could see what was happening. The Vrex had connected atmospheric processors from 3 different alien technologies. Each system worked fine by itself, but when they worked together, they created conflicts that the main computer could not resolve. "I think I can fix it," Lee Tae said finally. "But I will need access to the main environmental controls, and I will need to work fast." Zulhak hesitated. The main environmental controls were in a restricted area of the ship. No prisoner had ever been allowed there. But if Lee Tae could save the prisoners, it would save Zulhak's career too. "Engineer Brixdahl will work with you," Zulhak decided. "You can access what you need, but only under supervision." Brixdahl was a younger Vrex engineer who looked nervous about working with a prisoner. But he was also smart enough to recognize that they needed help. He led Lee Tae to the main environmental control room, which was filled with complex displays and control panels. Lee Tae examined the system architecture carefully. The problem was worse than he had first thought. The 3 different atmospheric processing technologies were not just conflicting with each other. They were creating feedback loops that made the failures worse over time. If nothing was done, the cascade would eventually affect life support throughout the entire ship. The human and Cheltari atmospheric processors work on similar principles, Lee Tae explained to Brixdahl, but the Morgani system uses completely different chemistry. When they try to balance each other, they create toxic combinations. Brixdahl looked at the displays with new understanding. "Can we separate the systems?" "Not without major modifications that would take weeks," Lee Tae replied. "But I can create buffer zones between them, isolated processing areas that prevent the chemical conflicts." Lee Tae began working on the environmental controls. His fingers moved quickly across the interfaces, making changes to system configurations and creating new processing pathways. Brixdahl watched in amazement as the humans seemed to understand their technology better than most Vrex engineers. But Lee Tae was doing more than just fixing the immediate problem. As he worked, he was also making subtle improvements to the overall system design. He created more efficient processing cycles. He added backup pathways that would prevent similar failures in the future. He even optimized the power consumption to reduce strain on the ship's reactors. The work took 4 hours. During that time, Lee Tae had to solve dozens of smaller problems that came up as he modified the systems. Each solution revealed more about how the ship operated. By the time he was finished, he understood the Void Talon's life support systems better than anyone except possibly Chief Engineer Zulhak himself. When the atmospheric processors came back online, the improvement was immediate. Clean air began flowing to the prison sections again. The toxic buildup was cleared within minutes. Prisoners who had been gasping for breath began to recover quickly. Zulhak arrived in the control room just as Li Tay was finishing the last adjustments. He looked at the displays in amazement. Not only were all systems working normally, but they were working better than they ever had before. Efficiency was up by 15%. Power consumption was down by 8%. How did you know how to do this? Zulhak asked. Li Tay wiped sweat from his forehead. I had to learn many different technologies on my colony. When you cannot afford new equipment, you learn to make different systems work together. This explanation satisfied Zulhak just as it had before. But Brixdal was more curious. He had watched Li Tay work, and the human's knowledge seemed to go far beyond what any colony technician should know. The modifications he had made were elegant and sophisticated. They showed understanding of advanced engineering principles. You must have been important on your colony, Brixdal said. Li Tay shrugged. I fixed things when they broke. That made me useful. Word of Li Tay's success spread quickly through the ship. Captain Veltar was relieved that his prisoners had been saved. Security Chief Crexmore was impressed despite himself. The other prisoners looked at Li Tay with new respect and gratitude. Dr. Kim So-young found Li Tay that evening as he returned to his cell. You saved hundreds of lives today, she said. The medical bay was full of prisoners who could barely breathe. Now they are all recovering. Park Min-ho nodded in agreement. The guards are talking about it too. They seem surprised that a human could solve a problem their own engineers could not. Li Tay seemed tired but satisfied. Sometimes being underestimated is useful. They let me see more of the ship than they probably should have. This was true. During his work in the environmental control room, Li Tay had gained access to many restricted systems. He had seen detailed schematics of the ship's layout. He had observed security procedures for sensitive areas. He had even glimpsed some of the ship's navigation data. Most importantly, he had been able to make more modifications to his communication relay access. The environmental control room was connected to the ship's main computer network. While Brixdal was focused on the atmospheric systems, Li Tay had quietly updated his hidden communication protocols. His messages could now carry much more detailed information. Technical specifications of the ship's systems, security codes and access procedures, even real-time location data from the navigation computers. Anyone receiving his transmissions would have everything they needed to understand exactly what kind of ship they were dealing with. But Li Tay kept all of this to himself. To Dr. Kim So-young and Park Min-ho, he was still just a resourceful colony technician who had gotten lucky. To the Vrex crew, he was a useful prisoner who could fix complicated problems. No one suspected that he might be something much more than he appeared. That night, as Li Tay looked out at the stars through his cell window, he allowed himself a small smile. The crisis had given him opportunities he could never have planned for. He now had access to information that would be very valuable to the right people. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, those people were getting closer every day. The next morning brought a change in Li Tay's status aboard the ship. Chief Engineer Zulhak requested that he be permanently assigned to the engineering section. Captain Veltar approved the request immediately. A prisoner who could prevent catastrophic system failures was too valuable to waste on cleaning duties. Li Tay's new quarters were in a less secure section of the ship. He had more freedom of movement and access to more areas. The other prisoners saw this as a reward for his heroic actions. The Vrex crew saw it as a practical decision to make better use of his skills, but Li Tay saw it as something else entirely. It was an opportunity to gather even more intelligence and prepare for what was coming. Because despite his calm exterior, Li Te knew that time was running short. They were only 10 days away from Vrex Prime now, and if his messages had been received, 10 days should be more than enough time for a response. Life aboard the Void Talon had settled into a new routine since Li Te's assignment to the engineering section. His reputation as a problem solver had spread throughout the ship. Even some Vrex crew members had begun asking for his help with difficult technical issues. To them, he had become the prisoner who could fix anything. Li Te's new quarters were larger and more comfortable than the cells in the main prison block. He shared the engineering section with a few other trusted prisoners who had specialized skills. There was Grix, a four-armed alien who was excellent with mechanical repairs. There was also Vela, a crystalline being who could interface directly with computer systems through touch. The engineering section gave Li Te access to parts of the ship he had never seen before. He could move freely through maintenance areas and equipment rooms. Security cameras were fewer in these technical spaces, and guards rarely checked on prisoners who were working on authorized repairs. Dr. Kim So-young and Park Min-ho were worried about this change at first. They feared that separating the three humans might be part of a Vrex plan to prevent them from working together. But Li Te assured them that his new position was actually an advantage. "I can learn more about the ship from here," he explained during one of their evening meetings. "And I can still help coordinate things between different prisoner groups." This was true. Li Te had become an informal leader among the prisoners. When conflicts arose between different alien species, they often asked him to mediate. When someone needed help with a problem, they came to Li Te first. The Vrex guards had noticed this but did not see it as a threat. To them, it just meant fewer problems to deal with. But Li Te was using his influence for more than just keeping peace among the prisoners. He was quietly building a network of contacts throughout the ship. Prisoners who worked in different areas would report to him about what they observed. Guards who had become friendly with certain prisoners would sometimes share information without realizing it. Through this network, Li Te learned that they were now only a week away from Vrex Prime. He also learned disturbing details about what happened to prisoners when they reached the capital world. Most would be sold in slave markets. Others would be sent to labor camps on harsh worlds. Some would be used for medical experiments. A few would be forced to fight in gladiator contests for entertainment. Dr. Kim So-young was particularly upset when she heard about the medical experiments. "They want to study how different alien biologies respond to various treatments," she said with disgust. "They see us as laboratory animals." Park Min-ho had discovered that prisoners with technical skills might be forced to work in Vrex military factories. "They could make us build weapons that would be used against our own people," he said. Li Te listened to all of this information with his usual calm expression. But privately, he was becoming more determined that none of this would happen. His secret communications had been going out regularly for weeks now. Someone had to have received them by now. Someone had to be coming. Meanwhile, the mysterious energy readings that Science Officer Krelath had been detecting were becoming stronger and more frequent. The readings appeared on long-range sensors for a few minutes at a time, then disappeared again. They seemed to be following the same general course as the Void Talon, but always staying at the very edge of sensor range. Krelath had reported these anomalies to Captain Veltar several times, but the captain was focused on delivering his prisoners, on schedule. Strange sensor readings were not his priority unless they represented an immediate threat, and these readings were too distant and too brief to be threatening. Probably just stellar phenomena. Captain Veltar had decided. Or maybe debris from old battles. This region of space has seen a lot of fighting over the years. Security Chief. Crexmore was more suspicious. His job was to worry about potential threats, no matter how unlikely they seemed. He had begun running additional security scans and increased patrols throughout the ship. But so far, he had found nothing unusual. Li Tay knew about the increased security because prisoners always noticed when guards changed their routines. But he was not concerned. His hidden communication modifications were too subtle to be detected by normal security scans. And his behavior as a cooperative prisoner had been so consistent that no one suspected him of anything. In fact, Li Tay's reputation for helpfulness had reached new heights during his time in the engineering section. When a power coupling failed in the ship's main computer core, he fixed it in half the time it would have taken the VREX engineers. When the gravity generators in one section began fluctuating, he identified and solved the problem before anyone got hurt. Each success made the VREX crew trust him more. Each repair job gave him access to more sensitive areas of the ship, and each opportunity allowed him to gather more intelligence that he could include in his hidden transmissions. Chief Engineer Zulhak had begun treating Li Tay almost like a junior engineer rather than a prisoner. He would ask for Li Tay's opinions on technical problems and actually listen to his suggestions. This was remarkable since the VREX normally considered other species to be inferior in every way. "You have an unusual understanding of integrated systems," Zulhak commented one day as they worked together on optimizing the ship's power distribution network. "Most engineers specialize in one area, but you seem to grasp how everything connects." Li Tay nodded modestly. "When you work with limited resources, you learn to see the big picture. Every system affects every other system." This was another explanation that satisfied the VREX engineer. But Engineer Brixdahl, who worked with Li Tay more often, was beginning to have doubts. The human's knowledge seemed too broad and too deep for someone who had just been a colony technician. His solutions were too elegant and too sophisticated. "Where exactly did you work before you were captured?" Brixdahl asked during a quiet moment. "New Busan Colony," Li Tay replied. "I maintained the infrastructure systems: power, water, life, support, communications. When you are the only technician for 50,000 people, you learn to fix everything." The answer sounded reasonable. Frontier colonies did often have to rely on one or two skilled individuals to keep everything running, but Brixdahl made a mental note to research New Busan Colony when he had time. Something about the human still seemed unusual to him. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim So-young had made her own concerning discovery. While working in the medical bay, she had gained access to prisoner transportation records. These documents showed exactly what would happen to each prisoner when they reached VREX Prime. "We need to talk," she told Li Tay urgently when they met that evening. "I found out what they planned to do with us specifically." She explained that humans were considered especially valuable because they were a newly discovered species. VREX scientists wanted to study human biology, psychology, and technology adaptation. Dr. Kim So-young herself was marked for medical research because of her scientific background. Park Min-ho was designated for technical labor because of his piloting skills. "And you," she said to Li Tay, "are marked as a priority subject for advanced study. They think your technical abilities make you representative of human intelligence." Li Tay's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "When do we reach VREX Prime?" 5 days, Park Min-ho answered. "I overheard the navigation officer talking about final approach procedures. 5 days. Li Tay considered this timeline carefully. If his messages had been received, if someone was coming to find him, they would need to act soon. The closer the Void Talon got to Vrex Prime, the more dangerous any rescue attempt would become. The capital system would be heavily defended with patrol ships and military bases. That night, Li Tay made his way to the communication relay access point for what he hoped would be the last time. He uploaded a final data packet that included their exact position, course, and estimated arrival time at Vrex Prime. He also included detailed information about the ship's defenses and the best approach vectors for an intercept. As he worked, Li Tay allowed himself to think about what would happen if no one came, if his messages had not been received, or if a rescue was impossible. He would need to consider other options. He had gained enough knowledge about the ship to cause significant damage if necessary. He could disable life support, destroy navigation systems, or even overload the main reactor. But those were desperate measures that would likely result in everyone aboard the ship dying, including the innocent prisoners. Li Tay preferred to believe that help was coming. Someone had to have received his messages. Someone had to be out there in the darkness, getting closer every hour. The strange energy readings on the ship's sensors were stronger now. They appeared several times each day, always at the edge of detection range. Science Officer Krelath had begun to suspect they might not be natural phenomena after all. But his requests for a detailed investigation were still being ignored by Captain Veltar. Li Tay had heard about these energy readings from prisoners who worked in the sensor monitoring stations. The description was interesting. An unknown contact that appeared briefly on sensors then vanished again. Something that was following them but staying just out of clear detection range. The alarm that woke everyone 3 days before reaching Vrex Prime was different from any that had sounded before. This was not a drill or a minor emergency. This was the ship's combat alert system. Red lights flashed throughout every corridor. Automated voices announced battle stations in the Virex language over and over. Li Tay sat up in his quarters and listened carefully to the sounds around him. He could hear Virex crew members running through the corridors. Their voices carried notes of confusion and alarm that he had never heard before. Whatever was happening, it had caught them completely by surprise. Within minutes, guards were ordering all prisoners to return to secured areas. Li Tay found himself being escorted back toward the main prison block along with other prisoners from the engineering section. As they walked, he caught glimpses of Vrex crew members rushing to their battle stations. The ship's main view screen in the central corridor showed space ahead of them. At first, Li Tay could see nothing unusual, just stars and empty darkness. But then something appeared that made his heart race with hope and fear at the same time. A massive shape was emerging from the blackness of space directly ahead of them. It was huge, easily 3 times the size of the Void Talon. Its design was unlike anything the Vrex had ever seen. Sleek lines and smooth curves gave it an almost organic appearance. But the energy readings coming from it were clearly artificial and incredibly powerful. Captain Veltar's voice came over the ship's communication system. Unknown vessel. You are entering Vrex Imperial territory without authorization. Identify yourself immediately, or we will consider you a hostile contact. The response came quickly, but it was not directed at Captain Veltar. The transmission was broadcast on open channels so that everyone aboard the Void Talon could hear it clearly, and the voice that spoke was human. This is Captain Yoon Ji-hai of the Korean Deep Space Fleet. We are here to recover Admiral Li Tae-sung. Prepare to be boarded. Li Tay felt his breath catch in his throat. After weeks of sending coded messages into space, hoping that someone would receive them, his rescue had finally arrived. But the response from Captain Veltar was exactly what he had expected. "We have no Admiral Lee Tae-sung aboard this vessel," the Vrek's captain replied. "We carry only prisoners captured during routine pacification operations. Your presence here is an act of war against the Vrek's empire." Captain Yoon Ji-hee's response was calm but firm. "Admiral Lee Tae-sung was captured on New Busan Colony 6 weeks ago. Our intelligence indicates he is currently aboard your vessel. Surrender him immediately and we will allow you to depart." The Vrek's crew was clearly confused by this exchange. They had no record of any Admiral Lee Tae-sung among their prisoners. They had captured several humans on New Busan, but none of them had claimed to be high-ranking military officers. Security Chief Crexmore was already checking prisoner records to see if there had been some mistake. Captain Veltar made the decision to bring Lee Tae to the bridge. If the humans were looking for someone specific, he wanted to verify that this person was not among his prisoners. 2 guards escorted Lee Tae through corridors filled with nervous Vrek's crew members preparing for possible combat. The bridge of the Void Talon was crowded with officers staring at their displays in disbelief. The unknown ship was not just large and powerful, it was also displaying technology that the Vreks had never encountered before. Their sensors could not get clear readings on its hull composition or weapon systems. Their targeting computers could not establish a weapons lock. "Bring the human forward," Captain Veltar ordered when Lee Tae arrived. Lee Tae was pushed to the center of the bridge where everyone could see him. He looked exactly as he had for the past 6 weeks. An ordinary human prisoner in gray prison clothes. Nothing about his appearance suggested that he might be an important military officer. "Is this your Admiral Lee Tae-sung?" Captain Veltar demanded, opening a communication channel to the human ship. The response from Captain Yoon Ji-hee was immediate. "Admiral, are you injured? Are the other members of your team safe?" Lee Tae looked directly at the main view screen. For the first time since his capture, his calm mask slipped slightly. Relief and determination flickered across his face. "I am unharmed, Captain Yoon. Commander Kim and Colonel Park are also safe. Mission parameters have been successfully completed." The Rex bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at the human prisoner they had considered harmless for 6 weeks. Mission parameters, Commander Kim, Colonel Park. The humans they had captured were not random civilians. They were military personnel who had been on some kind of mission. Security Chief Crexmore was the first to speak. "You told us you were a colony technician." Lee Tae turned to look at him. The change in his posture and expression was remarkable. The humble, cooperative prisoner was gone. In his place stood someone who clearly expected to be obeyed. "I told you I fixed things when they broke. That was not a lie." Captain Veltar was beginning to understand the terrible mistake they had made. "You are actually an admiral in the human military?" "Admiral Lee Tae-sung, Supreme Commander of the Korean Starfleet," Lee Tae confirmed. "Director of Human Defense Operations. And for the past 6 weeks I have been gathering intelligence on Vrek's military capabilities, ship designs, and operational procedures." The implications of this revelation hit the Vrek's crew like a physical blow. They had not captured a primitive human civilian. They had been holding one of humanity's highest-ranking military officers. Everything he had seen, every system he had accessed, every repair he had made would have given him detailed knowledge about their technology and capabilities. Chief Engineer Zulhak looked sick. "The communication modifications, the system improvements. You were sending intelligence reports." Lee Tae nodded. "Every few days for 6 weeks. Ship specifications, security procedures, prisoner populations, navigation routes, everything my people would need to know to find me. Captain Veltar tried to regain control of the situation. Even if this is true, you are still our prisoner. Your ship may be large, but we are in Vrex territory. Our reinforcements will arrive soon. Captain Yoon Ji-hai's voice came over the communications again. Captain Veltar, I suggest you reconsider your position. You are currently surrounded. The main view screen changed to show a wider view of the space around them. The Vrex crew gasped as they saw what had been invisible moments before. Dozens of ships were decloaking around the Void Talon. Human warships of various sizes, all displaying the same advanced technology as the flagship. They had been surrounded without ever knowing it. How many ships? Captain Veltar whispered to his sensor officer. 43 contacts and counting, sir. All human vessels. All armed with unknown weapon systems. Lee Tae watched the displays with satisfaction. The Korean Deep Space Fleet has been tracking your movements for weeks, Captain Veltar. Every Vrex ship in this region is currently being monitored. Your Empire's expansion into human space is about to end. Security Chief Crexmore made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He drew his weapon and pointed it at Lee Tae. Surrender your ships or I will execute the Admiral. The response was swift and decisive. Energy beams from the human flagship struck the Void Talon with surgical precision. The ship's weapons, shields, and engines were disabled in seconds. The attack was so fast and accurate that most of the crew did not even realize they had been hit until their systems started shutting down. Your weapons are offline, Captain Yoon Ji-hae announced calmly. Your engines are disabled. Your shields are down. Chief Crexmore, if you harm Admiral Lee in any way, we will demonstrate why threatening human officers is inadvisable. Crexmore lowered his weapon. The demonstration of the human ship's capabilities had made resistance clearly futile. They could disable specific systems without damaging the rest of the ship. They could have destroyed the Void Talon completely if they had wanted to. Captain Veltar slumped in his command chair. How long have you been planning this? Lee Tae smiled, and for the first time, it was not a small, humble smile. It was the smile of someone who had just completed a successful mission. The operation began the moment your ships entered human space, Captain. My capture on New Busan was not entirely accidental. We needed to understand your capabilities and gather intelligence on your military operations. You allowed yourself to be captured? The situation presented an opportunity for deep reconnaissance that we could not pass up. 6 weeks of observation from inside a Vrex prison ship has given us more intelligence than months of external surveillance could have provided. The Vrex officers looked at each other with growing horror. They had not just been outsmarted, they had been completely manipulated. The human they thought was a harmless prisoner had been studying them the entire time, and now they were facing the consequences of underestimating their enemy. Captain Yoon Ji-hee's voice came over the communications one final time. Prepare to receive boarding parties. Admiral Lee, we are coming to get you. Lee Tae straightened his shoulders and looked around the bridge at his former captors. Gentlemen, I believe my transportation has arrived. The docking bay of the Void Talon had never seen anything like the boarding craft that approached it. The human shuttle was sleek and quiet, moving with a grace that made Vrex technology look clumsy by comparison. It landed without a sound, and its doors opened to reveal figures in advanced combat armor, but these were not typical boarding party soldiers. The woman who stepped out first wore the uniform of a Korean Deep Space Fleet captain. Her movements were confident and precise as she walked into the docking bay where Lee Tae was waiting with his Vrex guards. Admiral, Captain Yoon Ji-hai said, with a respectful nod. "It is good to see you safe." Lee Tae returned the nod. After 6 weeks in prison clothes, seeing a fellow human officer felt like stepping back into his real life. "Captain Yoon, I trust the mission data has been useful." "Extremely useful, sir. Intelligence Command sends their compliments. Your reports have provided us with detailed information about VREX ship designs, operational procedures, and military capabilities." Behind Captain Yoon, more figures emerged from the shuttle. Dr. Kim So-young and Park Min-ho were brought forward, but they looked different now, too. Dr. Kim So-young wore the insignia of a Korean Star Fleet commander. Park Min-ho had the rank markers of a colonel. Like Lee Tae, they had been playing roles for 6 weeks. Security Chief Crexmore stared at them in disbelief. "All 3 of you were military officers?" Commander Kim So-young nodded. "I am Chief Medical Officer of the Korean Star Fleet. My assignment was to study VREX biology and identify potential weaknesses." Colonel Park Min-ho added, "I am a senior tactical pilot. My job was to analyze VREX navigation systems and defensive procedures." Captain Veltar felt sick as he realized the full extent of how badly they had been deceived. "Your entire capture was planned?" Admiral Lee Tae-sung considered the question carefully. "Not entirely planned, but when the opportunity presented itself, we decided to take advantage of it. Your attack on New Busan gave us a chance to place intelligence operatives inside your prison system. But the colony was destroyed. People died. New Busan was evacuated before your attack," Admiral Lee replied. "What you destroyed was an empty settlement with automated systems designed to make it look occupied. The few people you captured were volunteers who knew the risks." The revelation hit the VREX crew like another physical blow. They had not conquered a human colony at all. They had walked into an elaborate trap designed to capture them while providing intelligence to their enemies. Captain Yoon Ji-hai gestured toward the shuttle. "Admiral, we should return to the flagship. Fleet Admiral Hong is waiting to debrief you personally." But Admiral Lee raised a hand. "Not yet, Captain. We have other business to complete first." He turned to face Captain Veltar. "You are now prisoners of the Korean Deep Space Fleet. You will be treated according to the rules of war, which are apparently more generous than VREX standards." "What about our prisoners?" Captain Veltar asked. "All non-VREX prisoners will be returned to their home worlds if possible," Admiral Lee replied. "Those whose worlds have been destroyed will be offered sanctuary in human space." This announcement created a stir among the alien prisoners who had been brought to witness the exchange. Creatures from dozens of different worlds began talking, excitedly in their various languages. After months or years of captivity, they were finally going to be free. Hyuk, the 6-armed former military commander, stepped forward. "Admiral Lee, many of us would like to join your fight against the VREX Empire. They have destroyed our worlds and enslaved our people." Admiral Lee nodded. "Those who wish to fight will be welcome. We can use experienced soldiers and officers from all species." Commander Kim So-young moved to check on the health of the former prisoners. Her medical training had been real, even if her identity as a simple prisoner had been fake. Many of the aliens showed signs of malnutrition and stress from their captivity. Colonel Park Min-ho was already working with human technicians who had boarded the ship. They were downloading navigation data and prisoner records that would help locate other VREX prison ships and military installations, but Admiral Lee's attention was focused on the VREX officers. Captain Veltar, you and your crew will be given a choice. You can remain as prisoners of war, or you can provide information about Vrek's military operations in exchange for better treatment. Security Chief Crexmore snarled. We will tell you nothing. That is your choice, Admiral Lee replied calmly. But you should know that we already have most of the information we need. My 6 weeks aboard this ship have given us detailed intelligence about your technology, your procedures, and your weaknesses. Chief Engineer Zulhak looked confused. What weaknesses? Admiral Lee smiled. Your ships are powerful but not adaptable. Your technology is advanced but not innovative. You conquer other species and steal their knowledge, but you do not really understand how to improve it. That makes you predictable. To demonstrate his point, Admiral Lee walked to one of the bridge control panels. His fingers moved across the interface with the same skill he had shown during his weeks as a prisoner. But now he was not making repairs. He was taking control. Your command codes are based on mathematical sequences that my people have already broken, he explained as he worked. Your security protocols use patterns that we identified weeks ago, and your communication systems now have modifications that I installed myself. The main view screen activated to show the space around the Void Talon, but instead of showing just the human fleet, it now displayed a much larger tactical situation. Vrek ships throughout the region were marked with red symbols. Human ships were marked in blue, and the blue symbols vastly outnumbered the red ones. This is not just a rescue mission, Admiral Lee announced. This is the beginning of humanity's first major offensive against the Vrek's empire. While I was gathering intelligence from inside your prison system, my people were positioning forces throughout this entire sector. Captain Veltar stared at the display in horror. How many ships do you have? Enough, Admiral Lee replied. The Korean Deep Space Fleet has been preparing for this moment since your first attack on human space. We have been building ships, training crews, and developing new technology specifically designed to counter Vrek's capabilities. As if to prove his point, more human ships began appearing on the display. These were not just the vessels that had surrounded the Void Talon. This was an entire fleet emerging from stealth to reveal its true size and power. Chief Engineer Zulhak was studying the energy readings from the human ships. Their technology is generations ahead of ours. How is this possible? Humans are a newly discovered species, Commander Kim So-young answered. You assumed we were primitive because you had never encountered us before. But humans have been exploring space for longer than you realize. We simply had not expanded into this region until recently. Colonel Park Min-ho added, and when we learned about the Vrek's Empire's expansion toward human space, we decided to meet you on our own terms rather than waiting for you to find us. Admiral Lee moved away from the control panel and faced the Vrek's officers directly. Your empire has been conquering worlds for centuries. You have become used to facing species that are not prepared for your attacks. But humanity is different. We prepare for everything. Captain Yoon Ji-hye stepped forward. Admiral, Fleet Admiral Hong requests permission to begin the next phase of operations. Admiral Lee nodded. Granted. Signal all ships to begin simultaneous attacks on designated Vrek's military installations throughout the sector. It is time to show the Vrek's Empire what happens when they threaten human worlds. The main view screen changed to show a tactical overview of the entire region. Red symbols representing Vrek's installations and patrol fleets began flashing as human forces engaged them simultaneously. It was a coordinated attack on a massive scale, striking dozens of targets at the same time. Captain Veltar watched in stunned Silence as the display showed Vrek's forces being overwhelmed throughout their territory. "This is impossible. Our defenses are too strong. Our fleets are too powerful." "Your defenses were designed to stop the kind of attacks you are used to facing," Admiral Lee explained. "Desperate resistance from conquered species with inferior technology. But human military doctrine is based on different principles. We study our enemies carefully, then strike with overwhelming force at precisely the right moment." The battle. Reports coming in confirmed the success of the human strategy. Vrek's military bases were being captured or destroyed. Patrol fleets were surrendering or fleeing. Prison ships like the Void Talon were being intercepted, and their prisoners liberated. "How long have you been planning this?" Captain Veltar asked. "Since the moment your ships entered human space," Admiral Lee replied. "Every attack you made, every world you conquered, every prisoner you took gave us more information about your capabilities and intentions. We used that information to prepare the most effective response possible." Security Chief Crexmore made one last attempt at defiance. "Even if you destroy our forces in this sector, the Vrek's empire is vast. You cannot defeat all of us." Admiral Lee's expression grew serious. "We have no intention of conquering the Vrek's empire, but we will make it clear that human space is forbidden to you. Any Vrek ship that enters our territory will be destroyed. Any Vrek's force that threatens human worlds,